We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
That's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Really excited to have you guys back here to listen to another episode of Finding Freedom. In today's episode, I'll tell you what, if you've been a fan of my show for a long time, if you've been listening since back in the Felony Friday days, then you are in for a treat. You're in for, something familiar. I'm bringing on a guest who has been through the criminal justice system. He's going to share some stories about prison, some real stories about the politics of prison and what he's been through and where he is today. My guest, Jason Ritchie, he'll admit that he made some horrible, terrible mistakes, and he deserved to do the time that he did in prison. But his story really sheds light on a lot of the issues there are with prisons and how they operate, and the struggles with getting through that in order to find freedom on the other side. And you're going to like this episode, and if you do, I'm sure you will, but please go and make sure to subscribe either to the Lions of Liberty Network feed if you haven't already, or to my solo Finding Freedom feed, where you can find it just by searching Finding Freedom and John Odermatt. Just punch that in any podcasting app and it'll pop right up. I do have a very important announcement before we get to today's show. Going forward, Finding Freedom will no longer be published on Thursdays. This will be the last time that this show is published on a Thursday. Of course, as we talked about, as you heard about last week on Mark Claire's show and on my show, Mark has left Lions of Liberty. And as sad as that is, he's moving on, and he's going to have a new podcast called The Mark Claire Show. So I encourage you to go subscribe to that. But as sad as it is that Mark is leaving Lions of Liberty, we have to move forward, and we are going to move forward, and we have some good plans, some great plans. Brian and I are working on some things you're really going to enjoy. And one of the things that's changing immediately is my show is moving to Monday. So you will find Finding Freedom no longer on Thursdays, on Mondays, in your Lions of Liberty podcast feed and on the Finding Freedom solo feed. So plan accordingly, and let's get into today's show. All right, I am joined here today by Jason Ritchie. Jason did 17 years in prison for manslaughter. He got out in 2017. When he was in prison, he turned his life around. He got his GED. He got his associate's degree. And upon getting out in 2017, he got into San Diego State University and within a year of getting out. And he's since graduated with a degree. And this is kind of a throwback to, I used to do obviously more of these episodes, and my show was called Felony Friday, but with Finding Freedom, it still applies with everything that Jason has gone through to get where he is today. We're going to hear his story. So Jason, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, man. And, like we talked about pre-chat before the show, what I like to do, especially with stories of people who, have been through the criminal justice system and experienced that, I like to start all the way at the beginning and just to give my audience and myself to get a perspective of, where you came from, where you started out. So let's start at the beginning, your early years, your childhood. Tell us about where you grew up and what your life was like growing up.
Okay, I grew up in San Diego. I came from a lower middle class family. My dad was a hard worker in construction. He built houses and apartment complexes, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. for as long as they could afford it. We had 5 kids in my family. There's actually more kids, but that was my immediate family. Let's see. It was a strict conservative family, Christian, and I feel like I lived a little bit of a sheltered life in my youth. Went to private school when they could afford it, and was homeschooled when they couldn't. And then we moved from San Diego to Oregon, Corvallis, Oregon, and they could no longer.
I know
Moved.
Corvallis. I've been there recently.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's a nice college town.
it is. Yeah.
Home of the Beavers.
Mm-hmm.
So the city of San Diego passed a no growth ordinance, and that put my dad out of business because him and his partner had just invested in some properties, and so they basically went bankrupt because of that. And so my parents decided to move. They thought it would be best for the kids to not be in the big city, San Diego. And so they moved to Oregon, and I started going to junior high there. After Oregon, I moved to Washington State, Seattle suburbs, Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland, and went to public school there as well, high school there. I kind of consider that my stomping ground years, as a teenager. So, let's see. High school, I got a job offer to come back to San Diego to work for our pastor. And when I came back, I started getting in trouble, started hanging with the wrong crowd. And it was the first time I left the nest, left my parents.
About how old were you at that point in time?
18, 19. And so I started smoking weed, and the pastor found out and fired me and kicked me out of the house I was staying in. So I kind of went homeless for a little bit there. I got involved in a little crime and still running with the wrong crowd, and I ended up killing somebody on the street in a street fight. And I was facing.
When you say just to back up, you say run them with the wrong crowd. Like what type of stuff? What type of activity were you into? Was it selling drugs or?
Well, it was more like burglaries. We had a hustle where we would buy candy for really cheap and then go sell it door to door, pretending to be high school kids. And some of them were high school kids, but like saying that it was for a school event or something like that, and then sometimes robbing the home, when nobody was home. I was sentenced to manslaughter and residential burglary from where the gun came from. And I definitely, I don't feel like I was innocent, and if I was innocent in any way, it was just in my naivety, and just living a sheltered life, and then no longer being in that safety bubble, and just exploring and rebelling against the strictness of my family and stuff.
Yeah. And when you're in your early 20s, right? This was like when you were in your early 20s. I mean, that's a point in time where I think most people, you kind of feel invincible. I mean, you feel like almost nothing can touch you. So I'm curious, after the manslaughter happened, and You're charged. At what point in time did it really hit you? And maybe it hit you right away. But at what point in time did it really hit you? What had just happened? What had just happened?
It was sometime in jail. Being so young, like you said, feeling invincible. I went in there, like, I look back at myself now and I think of the person I was and how, like, cocky I was, but not for good reason. Just because I was young, probably overconfidence to compensate for my true insecurities, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I started having nightmares in there and seeing a psych, and I think that's when it became like real to me what really happened, like what I did, you know.
So what was jail like when you first got in? Was it a big shock, a huge change? I mean, what was that experience like coming into that?
Yes, definitely. The guys I was hanging out with on the street were black, and I was raised Christian and raised to love everybody. And so I didn't have any. I have my older brother and sister are half Mexican, and like racial bias wasn't. I was kind of like a hippie as a kid, turned gangster, kind of like listening to gangster rap. This was in the '90s. Um, so I didn't have a racist bone in my body, but then going into jail in Southern California or California in general, um, it's all segregated. It's like self-segregated though.
Mm-hmm.
There's politics in there that are racial, and that was new to me. Uh, I had to learn that really quick. Um, I say it took me like 5 years in prison to really wrap my head around what it was. And
What do you mean by that? To figure out how to navigate it and
yeah, I think so because you're kind of forced to navigate it right away, right? But I think
Mhm.
just the acceptance of it is what I had to wrap my head around. Yeah.
So how many years came with the initial? I know you got out in 17, but the manslaughter charge, what did that carry with it? How many years were you sentenced to?
It was 17 years total. So um, it was 17 and some change, a few months. I don't remember exactly how many, but so the sentence, I got 7 years for the manslaughter. It was 10 years for the gun because at the time they were very
Okay.
hard on gun enhancements. And I signed a deal for manslaughter so that I wouldn't have to face life in prison, uh, a life sentence in the courts. You know, if I took it to trial, I was taking a chance of getting 25 or more to life. Um, they charged me with murder robbery, which was special circumstances, which technically is the death penalty. Um,
Wow.
so I had a lawyer who cared, Mary Jo Barr, and she fought for me and she believed in me, and she believed that I deserved a second chance and that I
Was
was
was she a
young.
court appointed lawyer, or was she the
Yes,
lawyer that? Yeah.
yes, she was a public defender. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and so because she believed in me and fought for me, that she was able to get me that deal. There was also something about the DA. The DA got switched because right at the end, coming up to the trial, um, something to do with the fraud or something, and so they had to put a new DA on our case. So that also helped too because that lawyer wasn't prepared to fight, and we had been fighting it for a year already. So my lawyer had already been building our case, and had her plan and strategy and stuff to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a new DA. So I think that helped also give us a deal, because back then they weren't giving a lot of deals. They're very tough on crime in the 90s. This was 1999. And they were giving out life sentences, like, to a lot of people.
So you mentioned it took you 5 years to really adjust. What kind of led you to that adjustment? Were there? I mean, was it an epiphany that happened? Was it something that changed? Was it somebody that that you knew in prison that you talked with? What led to that change?
I think it just took 5 years for me to get comfortable in there, to just accept where I was at. I went in there. I like to say, like, when I was on the street, I thought I wanted to be a gangster. I was listening to rap music and watching a lot of violent movies, gangster movies and stuff. And I was a kid coming from a conservative, strict, isolated family, and that appealed to me because it was very Hollywood. Yeah.
This was during the time of the East West rap battles, Tupac.
Yeah,
and
it was
Biggie.
at its peak. Yes,
Yeah.
Tupac and Biggie, East Coast, West Coast. Yeah, it was very popular, and I kind of bought into that a little bit, and I think I tried to identify with it to escape who I really was, like who I was, raised to be. And I didn't like where I was at, so I was trying to be something else. And that's what I chose, and what led to that. 17 years in prison gave me a lot of time to think about these things, and I've come to understand myself and what led to my crimes, because I've put in a lot of thought. I've had a lot of time to think about it.
What do you think led to your crimes? Why do you think you ended up in that position?
Well, like I said, it was a large part due to rebellion. And like I said, the influence of the media. And yeah, like I was saying before, like not being content with where I was in life, with the cards I was dealt, and trying to be something else, trying to break away from that and find my own identity. And I just made some bad choices. Yeah.
So, did you find your own identity then in prison?
I did. I definitely discovered who I am. So that this can get really deep and get into controversial things too.
Let's do it.
I mean, race and politics.
I mean, say as much you're comfortable with, obviously, but yeah, I mean, this is a podcast, so we can go into anything you want to.
Sure. But race and religion, politics, all very controversial subjects. You're not even supposed to talk about them in public. But so I in prison, I learned who I was. I learned, okay, so racial politics in prison it's very racist, right, and separatist. And so I learned a lot about them, about their thinking, because I was just amongst them. And it's kind of go along to get along while you're in there. You just because if you don't, then you're going to become a victim, right? So but in that going along to get along, I was also learning history and culture and stuff, prison culture, but also European culture. Um, and they like to teach that to give people, to give the whites in there a pride, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
pride in themselves, um, to kind of recruit. So, um, so I learned a lot about that, but I went beyond that, and I studied for myself as well in there. Like studying was my thing in there. I love to read, and I love to learn as much as I can. And I did as much college and schoolwork as I could in there as well. And I just feel really comfortable now about knowing who I am and where I come from, and that goes beyond just race or borders, countries.
Mm-hmm.
It goes in. I studied science as well, and philosophy and psychology, and just I read really broadly, and sometimes in my mind I would debate these greats, in my head while I'm reading with them, and but there, yeah, I don't know. I learned a lot in there with that time, and I became very comfortable knowing who I am, where I came from, and where I'm at in this world.
Were you confident? I mean, you had a 17-year sentence. Were you confident that you were going to get out of prison? And how did you prepare yourself while you were still in prison for that release?
Yes. Well, no, I was not confident at all. From the moment I went to jail, I didn't believe I was going to get out. I thought I would get a life sentence. And when I was sentenced to 17 years, that was a huge relief, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the end because I had to do 17 years. And they gave me 3 strikes in that sentence. And that 3 strikes meant that I didn't have any chances. So they wanted me to do 17 years without getting in any trouble or doing any more crime.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very difficult to do because there's pressures in there to with the politics to get into fights, even just out beyond the politics, just bullying, or you have to stand up for yourself in there.
Mm-hmm.
um, Otherwise you'll be made a victim, and it's sad to say that sometimes uh, you have to hurt people in there. Otherwise you'll be hurt, you know
Mm-hmm.
um, so it was very, very difficult to navigate the 17 years with trying to walk that fine line of not getting in big enough trouble to where I would go back to court and get sentenced, picking up another strike and getting struck out, basically. And so one strategy I came up with is on the yards, every yard I went to, I would talk to the shot caller, and I would tell them, I would raise my hand. They call it raising your hand. So I'd raise
Mm-hmm.
my hand and tell them, anybody you want beat up, just let me know, and I'll go beat them up. And what that did for me was it allowed me not to have to pick up a knife. So I would do things to support the car, as they say. So there's basically 4 cars in prison in California, which is white, black, Mexican, and other. And other consists of mostly Asian or different kinds of smaller cultures that are in
Mm-hmm.
prison. They kind of group together into one to be able to run politics with the bigger cars. I'd say Mexicans are the biggest car in California. The Sureños, the Southern, and they're split into 2, Sureños and Norteños. But yeah, where's that going with that? So by
You were talking about how you would offer to go fight, so you wouldn't have to pick up
Right.
a knife. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I would offer to go beat up somebody that quote needed to be beat up, and that way I wouldn't have to go stab somebody else. And because the way the DAs work is they don't often pick up cases that are fights unless there's a very serious injury, um, unless it results in serious injury, or sometimes they'll do it if it's like 2-on-1 or 3-on-1 or something, because a lot of times the guys that mess up in there are getting jumped for their punishment or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I would also often try to go alone and tell a shot caller, like, I think I can handle it. Just let me go alone. And that way I was protecting myself from the DA trying to pick up a case against me, because I could just say, this guy started something and it was just a mutual combat, and they aren't known for picking up mutual combats.
So how frequently would you do something like that? Was this like, obviously, is it like a monthly thing, or is this like how frequently?
Probably every 3 to 6 months. I never stayed on a yard for more than a year, so I bounced around a lot. That's because I was in so many fights. Because and that's just the political side of it. There's also there's other personal things you have to deal with too, But after a while, you start to get a good reputation, and that helps as well. And then you start to learn the politics of it and being able to negotiate your way, or you just play the game basically, and basically be the one sending someone instead of being the one sent.
Yeah. So as you got closer and closer to, fulfilling that 17-year sentence, and you're still dealing, with all the internal prison politics and the fights and survival, how did you reconcile the two with, as you got closer to actually getting released, to still dealing with where you are in that current moment inside a prison?
Well, at some point, okay, so I was mainline for 12 years, and I guess I'm more comfortable saying this now that I've been out 5 years and like separated myself from prison politics and that lifestyle. But I mean, it is like I put myself at risk by saying this a little bit. It feels that way. I don't feel that way so much anymore.
If you don't, if you want to say, you don't have to. It's up to you.
Well, I don't know. I think it's okay to tell my story, and if it helps anybody,
Sure.
then good. So after 12 years in prison on the main line, I caught an attempted murder, which was a political move to remove somebody from the yard. And I went to the SHU, and I did 3 years in the SHU, which is essentially a long-term hold, a segregated housing unit. And at the end of that term, I was asked to kill somebody else, and I just wasn't in a position. I wasn't close with the people in power at that time, at that place, at that time, and so I was just being kind of used. But at that time, to answer your question, I made a decision that they weren't respecting my life, and that I needed to, what they call lock up. I needed to go into protective custody. And I chose to do that and spend my last 5 years in protective custody, rather than kill somebody for the cause or, for the car.
Mhm.
I didn't feel like they handled it responsibly. And then I would have done a minimum of 7 to 8 years for that. And that's just not how politics is supposed to go. That's not how I was taught to run politics. And I felt like they're using and abusing their power. And so I made the decision to protect myself and no longer associate with that, with them.
So after you made that decision, um, and you changed and you were moved into protective custody, was it? I mean, was it easier to focus on getting ready for your release, preparing yourself?
Yes, a little bit. So in protective custody, um, it's shifting, right? So things are changing in California prisons, and there's the protective custody is, in a sense, becoming a mainline. It's grown into something that's almost just as big as the mainline, and so let's see, what was the question? Oh, working
It did,
towards like.
yeah. Did when that move happened? Did it make it? Did it change? I mean, was it? I don't want to say easier, but was it different or I guess easier to start to work towards preparing yourself to eventual release?
Yeah. So it was easier because there's less politics.
Mm-hmm.
There's still politics though, and there's still gangs. But the racial politics is a lot less on the other side. So that on the PC side, like there's less obligation. Like there's nobody enforcing that you have to be a gang member because you're white. You have to ride with the white car, which
Mm-hmm.
on the main line, like from the moment you come in, you have to ride with the white car if you're white, or if you're Mexican, you have to ride with the Mexican cars, or black, right? So on. So on the PC side, there's less enforcement for that. It would be more of a peer pressure thing. But then there still is a solidarity, and I think it's just about safety in numbers and people grouping
Mm-hmm.
with what they know and understand. So, yeah, it was easier because it was
Yeah.
less politics, but it's not to say that there wasn't any politics. There were still gangs, and then yeah, so I still had to. I was on my own more, and I had to stand on my own more. Um, so it was a lot better for me to be able to make decisions by myself, and I didn't have to jump into a riot because somebody bought drugs from another race and couldn't pay it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, that type of thing. I didn't have to beat somebody up who just made a foolish mistake. I could just protect myself, and I was able to focus a lot more on my education and stay on yards longer that way.
Mm-hmm. So take us through when you do get the call that you're going to get released. Take us through what happened there, what it felt like.
Okay. It was unreal. Like up until the moment I got released, it was almost unbelievable that I could be released. And I think something in me was like holding back, like just like I lived so long, like with just enough hope to be able to work towards it, but
Mm-hmm.
not even ever really believing that it was possible.
Mm.
So just preparing myself to accept the inevitable of me spending the rest of my life in prison, because any little thing could lead to that. So up until the very moment I was released, it was just still uncertainty of that I was going to be released. And yeah, but being released was just amazing feeling, just freedom, elation. I had videos that just smile ear to ear. I had some lifelong friends and my brother that came to get me, and it just felt great. It was strange. It was also strange, surreal, um, yeah, foreign, but it felt good.
So were you released to a halfway house, or how did that work?
No, I did 100% of my time. So
Okay.
you're often have a sentence. Mine was like 17 years, 4 months, I believe. And I was given 85%, which means you're only supposed to do 85% of your time. They give you the opportunity for 15% good time. That was my case. But doing so long, I knew from the gate that 15%, I was never going to make it through 17 years and be able to hold on to that 15%, because there's just too much can happen in that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like one fight will probably wipe out like 5%, or I don't know the exact numbers. I haven't done the math on it, but for example, say getting into a fight could wipe out a few percentage of that. And so in 17 years, I knew there was no chance of me ever getting that 15% good time.
Mm-hmm.
But which is a shame because it didn't give me much incentive. And I think they've realized the fallacy of that. And I've noticed the change while I was in there in the program and the thinking, and even the name of there was CDC, and now it's CDCR, which is California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And there's a focus on rehabilitation now and on education, and I believe in the sentencing that is showing, as well as the programs and stuff coming out of prison. So to answer your question, I didn't have to go to a program because I did 100% of my time. So doing 100% of my time, I was released. I was allowed to go, and I just chose to go back to family and friends.
But while you were in prison, speaking of education, you got your GED and an associate's degree while in prison. Is that right?
Yeah. So I got my GED within like the first 3 years. I had started going to school to college actually before I went to prison, but I did it in a running start program where you start to go to college as a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But then I never completed. I had like just one class left or something like that, and I didn't complete that. So I never actually got my diploma or walked. And then, yeah, I constantly, my whole plan was to go to school, was to get an education, educate myself as much as I could while I was in prison. And I took college classes as much as I could, but because of the just the volatility of the environment and not being able to stay in one spot for long. Um, it took me like 15 years to get my associate's degree in there. And that was trying to do it the whole way.
Mm-hmm.
It also is because I didn't have the money to do it. I didn't have someone just paying for it. So I did complete my associate's degree on my last year in prison. And I got out in February, and I got to go to the college and walk with the other students for my
Wow.
associates. And that was pretty cool.
So, and then pretty soon, within a year after getting out, you started college, right?
Yeah. Education has always been a big thing in mine. And I had hoped to get a bachelor's or master's or something. I figured 17 years, I'd have plenty of time to do that, right? But yeah, so when I got out, there's a program I've heard about called Project Rebound. And it's a program to educate the formerly incarcerated and into higher education. And they originate in San Francisco State. And
Mm-hmm.
the year I got out, they branched out into, I believe, 8 other CSUs, and San Diego State was one of them. And San Diego is the city I was paroling to. And so I paroled to San Diego, and as soon as I got out, I went to probably within weeks of paroling, I went to the Project Rebound office at San Diego State, and I told them I wanna go to school. I want to continue my education. And they helped me. They advocated for me, and they helped me with the paperwork and things like that. And I got in. I got into San Diego State. I believe the following semester.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was fall 2017, or might have been spring
Nope, still
2018.
there?
Yeah,
Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear you. You lost my audio? Frozen? Frankie, can you try to be quieter?
Apparently, that was on my end. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Guess it froze up. But yeah, you were talking about San Diego State, and so how long did it take you to graduate? And what did you major in and all that?
I had my associates already. It took me 2.5 years to graduate, to complete my bachelor's. Um, while I was in prison, I did so much time, and I was getting out at 37, and I was like thinking like, what's the coolest thing I could do when I get out? Because I'm probably never going to retire, because I'll probably be working the rest of my life. Like, I served my retirement in prison, right? So I thought that going into film would be the coolest thing I could go into, and so I I earned a degree, and I ended up doing an interdisciplinary degree
Hmm.
in film, journalism, and art.
That's cool. So have you had any jobs in that field since you got out? Any work?
Yeah, yes. I do side gigs.
Hmm.
I do photography and film for often. my realm has been in like nonprofits, in places like of reentry and also recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got into San Diego State and became part of that program at San Diego State, Project Rebound, um, I started seeing the amazing life transformations of my cohort, my friends around me that were also formerly incarcerated and coming into college and doing some amazing things with their lives. And so I, I was like, somebody's got to start telling these stories. And so I just decided to do it. Uh, I used my student loan money to buy camera and sound equipment, the best I could afford. And I just started filming my friends. And it ended up turning into a film that got picked up by KPBS. It's called Rebound. And it's we narrowed it down to two women, two formerly incarcerated women who have gone into higher education and both graduated from San Diego State. One is currently pursuing her doctorate in North Carolina or South Carolina, I forget.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is now pursuing her master's at San Diego State.
Wow, that's cool.
So I got to help them tell their stories and make a full-length documentary. And it got picked up by KPBS, which was like my favorite channel to watch in prison. So it's really cool.
That's awesome. So something happened to you recently within the past few years where you got into some more trouble with the law, right? You had a couple DUIs,
Yes.
and you ended
Yes.
you end up going back to what happened there?
Yes. So I got out of prison and I started doing really good. I was focused. I told myself stay away from guns, stay away from drugs. Um, I did great. I graduated from college. I got off parole. I made a documentary. Um, but then a big factor was COVID, right? And I became bored and isolated, and I turned to alcohol. I started drinking too much, and so I ended up getting some DUIs, like a ridiculous amount of DUIs actually during that time. And I got 4 DUIs within 4 months.
Wow.
And yeah, it's crazy to look back on that I can make such a mistake over and over. Part of it, I believe, is there's always multiple factors, right? But one of the big factors was I lost my little brother to heroin slash fentanyl overdose.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I was grieving him and trying to drown that pain. I feel good now, and it's hard to explain, but I'm sure there's traumas and stuff from the past, from prison, 17 years in prison, that were catching up with me, even though I was doing good and performing well in school and stuff. I'm sure there's psychological, mental things that were catching up with me, and there's just personal life issues as well. And yeah, it was just it just all culminated in with COVID, and alcohol is what I turned to. And I think once I got the first DUI, I thought I was through. I kind of gave up, and I thought I was going back to prison for life, because I was a previous 3-striker. That was the deal I signed to, and I thought, I didn't know the law, and I thought that maybe just that one DUI would send me back to prison for life, right? But I came to find out that the laws had changed, and some of the strikes that I signed to were no longer considered strikes. So that wasn't the case. And one DUI isn't a felony; it's a misdemeanor. But I was foolish enough to get 4 DUIs, and it's the 4th DUI that is the felony.
Wow.
So, um, again, I got another good lawyer, a public defender, who believed in me and fought for me, and I'm grateful to both of my lawyers for that. Um, and also probably because of COVID, like, so we made a 50-page mitigation packet, which is basically outlining all the good things I was doing, you know, all the success I had had since prison, and so that was working in my favor. And then I think also, the fact that it was COVID, the prisons and the jails were overcrowded, and they weren't trying to lock up people for smaller things. So I think that allowed me to get out. I did have to go to jail. I spent 6 months in there fighting it, and I signed to those 6 months in jail, and then I signed to a 6-month program, and I ended up going to the Salvation Army and doing my recovery there.
So I have a little bit of time left, but I want to ask you two more questions here.
Okay.
First question is something that I ask pretty much all my guests. If there's anything, is there anything that I missed that when you look at your story is really important that you'd like to talk about? So I just want to give you time to kind of highlight that if you have something that I really missed asking you about.
Yeah, thank you. I would say, like, what I've learned is that life is about love and connection, and people need to be loved, and they need to feel like they're a part of something other than just themselves. And they need, so our society could work on building that connection and community. I think that's what would keep people from committing crimes, caring about others. And then there's I think understanding for people's circumstances, because we all come from different backgrounds, and some people are almost just destined to commit crime and go to jail or prison, just from where they come from. So I think it's important for society to understand that. And the third thing is, I'm a huge advocate for education in prison and outside of prison, and that just knowledge of self, and knowledge towards, like, a passion, something you want to do, and having a meaning and purpose to life is goes a long ways, I think, to
Right. So not only like higher education, but also self-improvement and really self-awareness and understanding yourself, right?
yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah.
And not that easy to find either.
No. It takes work for sure.
Yeah.
So one more question for you. As you look forward in your life, you look at your past, everything that you've been through, ups and downs, and you look where you are today. When you look out 5 years, 10 years, what types of goals do you have? What would you like to achieve?
I have big goals, big dreams. So I would love to start a production company. I'd love to start a platform and production company that uses modern. Sorry, let me get this right in my head. I want to teach science through storytelling, and I want to do that through digital media. And so I've studied going to school. SDSU has been working towards that, getting the interdisciplinary in film, journalism, and art. And I've also been enrolled in a master's program for learning design and technology. So I love learning and I love teaching, and I want to continue that path. I would also love to continue making documentaries and helping other people tell their stories. With my recent mistake into alcoholism, and also the death of my brother, I have a passion for recovery now, and I want to do some projects in recovery. I think I have some good ideas for that.
That's awesome. Is there any, do you have any social media or any way people can contact you that you want to share? If you don't, that's fine. Just put it out there.
I'll just put my email out there for right now. Jayritch, JAYRITCH 619 @gmail.com.
All right, Jason. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future on accomplishing those goals. I'm sure you will, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
All right, thank you, John. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for coming on the show. All right, hope you guys enjoyed that episode of Finding Freedom. Just incredible guest with the stories that he told. And, I've had a lot of guests on in my time doing Felony Friday and Finding Freedom who have been through the prison system, who have lived out the violence and lived out the politics and the racism that is rampant in much of the criminal justice system, especially the prison system. And especially, and we talked about it a little bit on the show, my previous guest, actually, no, we didn't. That was after the show when I brought it up to Jason. My previous guest, Damon West, who wrote the book The Coffee Bean, talked about really facing that violence head on. And Jason also got into how difficult it is to navigate that violence and decisions that you have to make in order to survive in prison, to make it to the other side. So a lot of people, look at someone like Jason with the crime that he committed and would say that he doesn't deserve a second chance, would say that he should serve his life in prison. Well, that's not something that I believe in personally. I do believe in second chances, especially when a crime like that happens at such a young age, when someone commits a crime of manslaughter. So, of course, someone like Jason is going to get out of prison. And the prison system, which it has changed some, but the prison system should be focused on rehabilitating people like that and making them into, or helping to form them into individuals. Of course, a lot of it is on them to take the action, but give them the opportunity to become the individual where they can actually contribute value to society. It does nobody any good to have a prison system that just is a culture that just makes people worse and beats people up and spits them out the other side as lesser human beings. That does not do good for that individual, certainly, and that's not good for society as a whole, because people in Jason's shoes are going to get out of prison. And do you want them to come out rehabilitated and given an opportunity to actually thrive and add value to this world? Or do you want them to come out angry and upset and looking to exact revenge on anybody and everyone around them? I don't want that. And if you want that, then you're an idiot. But that's just how I feel about that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. And I just want to say one more time, so you don't forget, this show, Finding Freedom, is moving to Monday. So you will hear it on Lions of Liberty next Monday. It'll be the next show you hear. We'll have back-to-back Finding Freedoms. Unless, of course, you're in the Lions of Liberty Pride, then you will get our bonus episode, one of our bonus shows, which you have every week this time of year, is called Degenerate Gamblers. And we'll be recording that on Friday and releasing it into our bonus feed on Friday. Of course, you can join the Lions of Liberty Pride for as little as $5 a month and getting all that content. Just go to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. Join, come have fun with us. It's a good time. It's a great community. And I will talk to you all on Monday. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fire's liberty burning.